These plants have about 4 to 5 weeks left before they will have finished and they will be out of here. But is that the end? Not if I have anything to do with it. Hello and welcome back to the No Dig Norfolk Gardener. Now, from our polytunnel, we've had so many harvests. You've seen us harvest potatoes from here that we had back in April. Spring greens and spring cabbage. We've had radish. We've had pak choy. And of course those wonderful carrots that we were enjoying in April and May before the outside ones became ready. And that's not even to mention the strawberries that we had, Mrs. W.
Can't forget those strawberries.
Those strawberries were ready before the end of April, weren't they, Mrs. W?
Yeah, they started to ripen the end of April. Saw us right through, well,
May and June.
we still occasionally get a ripe fruit now from them, so they've done very well.
We do. And of course there's all these lovely summer harvesting plants, tomatoes, aubergines, cucumbers. The chili peppers are now starting to colour up. So are the sweet peppers. So we'll have lots of those. But all too soon, this tunnel will be empty. 4 to 6 weeks' time, all of these plants will be gone. So what do we do then? Now, I've seen that people grow a lot of lettuce and salad crops in their polytunnels, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. A lot of people grow them because they're either selling them, and that's how they make their living. But what do we, as ordinary gardeners, do? There's so much more you could be growing in here besides lettuce. Salads. You can see down here that myself and Mrs. W, we are going to be planting some. They're actually going to go in this middle bed. There's some lovely lettuce that we've already started off. There's pak choy in there. There is endive.
And some spinach as well.
And some spinach, yes, which we've already started off. All of those plants will give you nice harvests by the time we get to sort of the end of October, November. And the trick really is to grow as many as you can, so that you can take as many leaves off of each plant as you can to give you what you need. But there is so much more you could be growing in here. You could be growing other things that will give you harvest this side of Christmas. And there are lots of other things that you can be starting off, planting out, and then they will give you harvests the other side of Christmas, into the new year, into 2025, so that you get them just that bit earlier. Now, the first thing I'm going to be sowing is actually some lettuce. This is a variety called Autumn King. And we grew this last year and it was really successful, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, it really was. We were able to have leaves from this actually before we got to Christmas. And then as we go into the new year, it starts to grow away again. We get more leaves and then eventually it hearts up. Our other favourite to sow is Winter Density. With all of these I'm sort of aiming for a couple of seeds per cell. And of course, if one germinates, happy days. But if we get two germinate within the cell, we'll just thin to the strongest seedling. And just like Arctic King, we will get leaves from this before Christmas, and then we should get a harvest again from February onwards. Right at the very end of August, I actually sowed some onions that we're going to overwinter, and they're now starting to germinate now, so looking really quite good. And they again will grow here in this polytunnel, and we will get a harvest toward the end of May as we tip into June. But also I'm going to be sowing some pak choy and some radish. Both of these I shall be sowing every 5 to 6 weeks, so that we get a continuity going. And they do grow really quite well. This pak choy yushu, which we've talked to you about many times over this year, I've only had one that's actually bolted and gone to seed.
Yeah, and that was quite an older plant before I did it, so
Yeah,
that was...
it had been in the ground quite some time.
Yeah.
So these do really, really well. And of course, turnips. I already have some turnips to put in. These are 2 cross. We've been growing these for the last couple of seasons now. They really are amazing. They only get about so big. They're so tender and so lovely. Great to drop into your winter casseroles and stews. But also great to be able to add to your salads. I'm also going to be sowing some beetroot. And in this case it's going to be the golden burpees. I really do quite like this. And I know Mrs. W does too. Now these will not be ready before the new year. We will get them going. They will go into the beds. They will slow up as we get to Christmas, but they'll be as a good size before we get there. And then as we approach February, they will start to grow away nice and strongly again. And hopefully we get some early, very early harvest of beetroot as we get to March and April. And all of those seeds that I've just mentioned, we should be multi-sowing. 5 to 6 seeds I'll be aiming for in each cell. The other thing that I'm going to be sowing is some kohlrabi, purple delicacy. Now we have some out in the plot. You saw us put those out there in, what was it, about
A month back, something?
a month or so back,
yeah.
mustn't it? But again, these will grow very nicely here in the polytunnel because it's protected. It won't get all the elements of the wind and the rain and any frost that we get. So we'll be able to enjoy those. And they really are quite great because they have a lovely sort of cabbagey sort of taste. And again, something great to drop into your stews and casseroles. We're also going to be sowing some chard. Now, you normally sow this a bit earlier than this and they can go out into the plots. We're not putting it in the plots, we're putting it in here. The next thing I want to sow is some more spinach. Now, I've already sown some spinach and that's going to be going into these plots very, very soon indeed. And that will give us some lovely welcome greens during the autumn and winter months. It'll then take a break, just as many of these will, and then it'll have a really good flush in the new year as we get to February. But I do just want to sow some more. If you're going to be growing it outside, I wouldn't sow it now and put it out there, but actually in here in the polytunnel or in the greenhouse, it'll be absolutely fine. Curly kale. Now, we have a couple of plants that are already outside in our plots, and they're ready to give us harvest now if we so want them. We will certainly be enjoying that over the autumn and winter period. However, I just want to have a couple of plants that I put into here that will grow away and then start to give us some lovely leaves as we approach spring of next year. All of that will help with the hungry gap. And then the last thing that I want to sow is some spring onions. And again, I've already sown some. We sowed them back in August, and the ones that were sown mid-August were the last ones that we will actually get this year. They're actually going to go out into an outside plot. And then we sowed some right at the back end of August, and they will go into here, and we normally see a harvest of spring onions late March and into April. But I'm thinking to myself, let's sow some now, a few more, let them grow away in here, and again, as we go into next year, these should then be ready late April and May, all helping with that hungry gap. Also in here, I have some spring cabbages that I sowed back in August. They will go in here too, and they will give us actually quite an early harvest. Last year we saw our harvest sort of February time when they were ready to take. And if you grow enough, you can take every other one and use it as spring greens, leaving the rest to heart up. And we enjoyed those hearts during April and May, didn't we,
Yeah,
Mrs.
we did.
W?
They were really nice. Yes.
Also from those plants, I shall be putting side by side. They will actually mature later. Clearly it's much colder outside than it will be in this polytunnel. So we can help ourselves and make sure we've got plenty of food to eat as we go into the new year, and most certainly into the hungry gap. And the amazing thing about all of these things that we're going to be sowing, you'll have eaten them all before May. And May is when you want to put all of these wonderful plants back in here for your summer harvests. And one of the things that I'm always working on for myself and Mrs. W is how can we sustain ourselves with potatoes for as long as possible. We grew some in the plots this year and we've just finished those.
Yes.
I also started 10 of these tubs off about May time.
Are these 30-litre tubs, are these?
Yes, they are, yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought they
they're
were.
30-litre tubs.
Yeah.
And they're actually down near the house, still in their tubs, and we harvest them as and when we need them. The other thing that I did is that I started some main crop potatoes off in some tubs there the other side of the greenhouse, and we'll take a look at those a little bit later in the year, and just to see what the yield is with those. But I've got to think about a bit later in the year, so I'm going to start some potatoes off now. A lot of people do these because they want to have potatoes for Christmas, and indeed these will be ready for a harvest round about that time, if not November. But what we have suffered with in the past is that we've grown these and it's got very wet, and of course we can also have very warm days in September and October, and then blight strikes. So I'm thinking, right, I'm going to start these off now, and then once that polytunnel is empty of the summer harvesting vegetables, I'll then move them into there. It'll do two things. Hopefully avoid the blight, but also avoid any potential frosts that we might have in November and December. It'll keep the cold winds off, and hopefully we shall have harvest through December and into January.
So which variety do you have here, Mr. Wilson?
This is Red Duke of York, Mrs. W.
Oh, okay.
And apparently they're supposed to be very good for roasting.
Right.
So you can see that I've put a couple in there. I'm just going to cover those over, and then we shall put 2 more in. Only this time they'll be on the opposite sides. This is our own homemade compost.
That looks really nice, doesn't it?
It's very good, Mrs. W,
Yeah.
I have to say.
Bit twiggy, but that's not a problem.
It's not a problem with us. Stick a label in there so that we know what they are. The other 2 tubs that I have there, they're going to be some Charlotte. And they are Mrs.
Yes.
W's absolute favourites.
Has to be.
And I'll tell you this now. If we can get these to harvest and then mix them with the things we've just sown in the polytunnel, it's going to be an amazing Boxing Day, Mrs. W.
Oh, yes.
A lovely salad with our spring onions and our radishes and our lettuce leaves.
Yep. And lovely, lovely new potatoes.
Yes.
Charlottes. Yay!
A lot of those seeds that we sowed earlier in the video, they'll be going into here too. Because this greenhouse is no different. 5 to 6 weeks' time, all of this will be gone. But what we will be doing, we'll be enjoying all of the produce that's still yet to come out here. Many, many red cherry tomatoes for you, Mrs. W.
I know. That's
Sun
really
Gold.
good. Yeah.
Ailsa Craig. And actually, one of the really things I'm really pleased about, Mrs. W, is that our chilies are starting to ripen.
Yes. Thankfully. Now the jalapenos, aren't they?
They are.
And we've got some of the Cheyenne in the polytunnel, which are now ripening as well. So
We have. So if you've got undercover growing spaces and you think that's the end, it doesn't have to be. You can still keep growing lots of food that will feed you over the autumn and New Year period. If you're thinking of getting some undercover growing space, maybe a polytunnel or a greenhouse, but you're not quite sure and think, well, do I need to invest in that because it's only tomatoes and aubergines and chilies and peppers? Just follow us here on this channel and just see the amount of food that we get out of these undercover growing spaces all year round. Not just summer, but through autumn and winter too. The best way to do that is to make sure you subscribe to our channel. As always, we always welcome your comments, and I do try to answer each and every one of them as they come in. Let us know what your plans are for your undercover growing spaces. Have you made a plan? And if you haven't, are you going to? But tell us all about it. We all learn so much from those great comments. Do have a great gardening week. And myself and Mrs. W, well, we shall see you on the next one.